Excellent.
You okay with staying this?
That's a good idea.
Okay, thank you. Good evening. The hour being after 6:45, I'd like to call the November 17th, 2022 school committee meeting to order. We'll start with the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. And next, we'd like to actually take a moment of silence for the former Walpole school teacher, Charles Cinto. Mr. Cinto was born in Walpole and attended the Walpole Public Schools. He earned varsity letters in football, golf, hockey, basketball, and track. After college, he taught science for 38 years, most of those years in Walpole. Mr. Cinto also coached football, basketball, soccer, and hockey, leading the Walpole hockey team to win state championships in both 1963 and 65. Charlie was inducted into the Massachusetts High School Coaches Hall of Fame in 1978. Sincere, heartfelt condolences are conveyed to the Charlie Cinto family. Moment of silence. Thank you. Okay, and next we have recognitions.
Yes, we have here Mr. Charlie Farrow, who has won the MIAA Unified Track Coach of the Year. It's a wonderful honor for Mr. Farrow and his tremendous team of coaches and support staff and athletes. We thank him for his dedication to our students in this program, and I know that he has some students and a couple of other people to introduce. So come on up. Sure.
Pull up a chair.
Thank you. So as I wrote a letter to Mrs. Goff, and I said, I accept this award, but it takes a lot of people to be behind something like this. Have you ever been to a track meet? Track meet explodes, just goes. So start with the super, you, Bridget, you've been to track meet, you see what it's like. It's pretty cool stuff, right? I know Mr. Hahn was there at the high school when they were going on. The administration, Mr. Imbush, has been behind us 100% the whole time. Mr. Dow, the athletic director, same thing. We've hosted a couple of sectional meets, and that's an incredible feat to do. And then you got Kim Poirier. Obviously, without her, the vans wouldn't go, and she flips on a dime. She can change it whenever the kids need to be picked up or driven somewhere. She's affectionately known as Kim from Transportation. I actually didn't even know her last name until. Mr. Geary, who's the adaptive physical education teacher at the high school, they actually do the stuff that we do in track during the day at gym, which is pretty awesome. Paula Mazzarelli, one of our assistant coaches, Courtney Notabat, Officer Hart and Rebel come to all the track meets and they hang out and do that. And then we have to have a nurse with us at all times for obvious reasons. So it takes a lot. And I take this as a recognition for everyone that helps us out. This is Mrs. Wilson. She's one of my assistant coaches.
Hi. Hello.
And this is one of the athletes. And what do you usually say?
Alexander.
No, come on, man.
Come on.
Who are you?
Who are you?
I'm Alexander Marr.
That's right. And this is Michael McCarthy, the self-proclaimed GOAT of Unified Track.
Yep.
Excellent.
We started probably 6 years ago with track, and we were the 37th team of Unified Track in the state of Massachusetts. There's now 100 teams, which is incredible. We became a unified national champion 4 years ago because we participate in 3 events every year that you have to do and maintain that. So we do basketball, but we do track, we do bocce. And I know Christine Crawford at the middle school also has her own program. She's starting up, and she actually challenged us to a floor hockey game recently. And we'll take them on and do that. But as a unified national champion, you also have to have stuff to do during the day. We have why don't you explain the coffee? What do you guys do every Tuesday and Thursday?
Okay, so we have a coffee business. It's called
Brewing Independence, and it's on Tuesdays, Thursdays. And what it is, it's coffee, or you can make coffee, hot cocoa, which is the best, and then teas, also, and there are these different stations. One is the order form, and that's like gets the coffees ready, like medium roast, and
Any
like
different flavor,
French
right?
vanilla.
Yeah.
And then the other one is the barista, which they have to put the cup under the Keurig, put the the K-cup in the machine, and then start it. But you have to make sure you put the cup under it.
Can't forget that.
And how'd you like to get a cup of coffee every morning from Alex Morrow?
That'd be great.
Makes you
Yep.
day. Makes you day.
But you have to pay for it. Unfortunately,
Fair is fair.
yeah, Dunkin'.
It's much cheaper.
And Starbucks,
better.
too.
Oh, yeah, probably.
Mike, why don't you explain what a track meet is?
So a track meet is basically a meet that where all teams meet and make new friends and participate in javelin, shot put, 100 meter, 200 meter, 400 meter, 4x100 meter relay,
Right.
and et cetera. It's a lot of fun.
Long
and
jump, too.
Long jump,
Yep.
and yeah,
And at the sectional meet last year, we won sectional meet. We were state champs.
yeah. When we won this sectional meet last year, it was one of the greatest moments that ever happened to me in my life. So.
So I accept this, and thank you all for having us, but I accept this in honor of all the other people that help out. Correct?
Correct.
And what's one of the best things that you do right before, to get everyone going?
Let's go.
Let's go. Does anyone have any questions for these fine young gentlemen and my assistant coach, Mrs. Wilson? No, me. Yes.
Here. First of all, congratulations,
Thank you
Mr.
very
Farrow and
much.
Ms. Wilson, and to you, the athletes. Will you tell us what's your favorite track meet event?
What do you think,
That's hard.
You can say a couple if you want.
Okay, so long jump is mine. I love to jump far. I would say it's a little bit of a workout, but the 800 meter, the 2 laps.
Wow.
Yeah,
Cool.
it's hard doing it.
For sure.
And then my last one is the shot put. That's my favorite. Yeah.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Ms. Galvin?
I was just going to say, I'm not sure, but Michael, I think I met you at Fisher School because, did you go to Fisher School and did you have Mrs. Fredette a little while ago?
I did.
I remember because my daughter Annie was in your grade and you guys got to be very good friends. Are you doing this as a volunteer? Like, are you coming back? Because I know you've graduated already.
Yeah, I did.
But you've got the volunteering bug, huh?
Mm-hmm.
Thank you very, very much for that, because I think that's one of the wonderful things about Walpole, is that people who find ways to volunteer make important connections, and it sounds like you are still a very, very important part of the group. Alex, do you think that maybe someday you would want to be a volunteer?
I'd love to give it a try.
Yeah, it's wonderful. This is one of our favorite parts, when real people come to our meetings and show us some of the good things that are going on. So thank you. And thank you, Charlie, for all that you do, because it's fantastic. It's good stuff.
Great, thank you.
Thank you very much. Have a good night. Thank you.
Beautiful.
Great, thank you. Our next order of business is the Walpole High School Student Representative. Favor, I hear you have some news for us today.
Good evening. I'm Favor Nyende, and I am a sophomore at the high school. For today's report, term 1 has come to a close, as many students have worked hard to start the new year off on the right foot. And last weekend was a time of relaxation as students got Friday off to pay their respects to veterans. Parent-teacher conferences are currently in session until 8 p.m. and will resume on Monday from 4 to 6:30 p.m., which gives parents an opportunity to check in on their kids' performances. Timberwolf Wednesday will be hosted right before Thanksgiving break, where students can enjoy a class-free day and participate in various activities, including the pep rally. The day will be broken into 3-hour-long blocks, with the pep rally taking place during the last part of the day. Fall sports are in the process of closing out their season. Both boys and girls soccer put up a strong fight in the playoffs. Football also gave their all in Friday's playoffs games. Field hockey was very successful as they made it to the Final Four. And additionally, registration for winter sports is now open. Clubs continue to run successfully as the new term begins. The speech and debate team competed in Natick last weekend with very successful results. Additionally, the Community Service Club is hosting a food drive, which will run through November 21st, which is this coming Monday. The Model United Nations met for the first time on Tuesday. Also, the Music Honor Society, Tri-M, will be hosting its first coffee house on December 16th and would love to have a large attendance. And finally, the Student Council continues to run smoothly as Fall Yard Cleanup was a successful fundraiser, and currently plans for the pep rally are being finalized. Thank you for your time and have a wonderful evening.
Thank you. Any comments or questions for Favor? Oh, thank you so much. I know that even though the term is wrapped up, I'm sure you have lots of things to do, so we'll understand if you need to leave.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Peter.
Do you a favor.
All right, our next order of business is the out-of-state field trip request.
Yes, so we have high school music teacher, Kendra Nutting, who, thank you. I know you had to make a mad dash from parent-teacher conferences, right? To come, so come on up. She is requesting an out-of-state field trip for Walpole High School. There's a student, Autumn Matthews, to Cincinnati, Ohio, from February 21st through February 26, 2023. And I won't let Kendra explain the honor that Autumn has
Sure.
received and answer any questions that you may have. Thank you.
Absolutely. Autumn auditioned for the American Choral Directors Association National Honor Choirs. Every other year, this association has a national conference open to choral directors across the country. And as part of this conference are performances from several honor choirs comprised of thousands of students from across the country. The audition process took place at the beginning of November. Autumn was one of 3 students from Walpole High School who auditioned, and she was the one out of the 3 who was accepted to attend. She'll be singing in the mixed choir. We're all very, very proud of her. She is incredibly excited. And yeah, it's a great honor for her.
Awesome, that's amazing. Comments or questions?
And I believe she's coming in to be recognized, I think, at the next school committee meeting.
Oh, great, excellent.
Maybe,
Mr. Buckley?
Through you, Madam Chair, you hit the right school committee for this type of request. We're pretty much in the tank for music and the arts. I want to thank you for creating these spaces to encourage your students to really push themselves and audition for really competitive spaces to go. I know it's a great, it is a great academic experience as a musician to be with other high-level performers, and
Absolutely.
I think she'll, hopefully she'll join us after she goes so she can report on the time she had. So if no one has any other questions, I would make 2 motions. One, to waive the 30-day notice requirement for an out-of-state field trip, and secondly, to approve the Walpole High School trip to Cincinnati for the American Choral Directors Association National Conference.
I'll second both of those.
I don't think we have to waive anything.
It's February.
Oh, is it
It's
February?
February.
I thought it said
Yeah.
December. All right, never mind then. I was like, wait a minute.
Yeah, I thought so too at first,
So
that's
they're
why.
attending
yeah.
the
It would-
December meeting.
Yeah, I guess I would, the only thing, maybe I would ask, as much as we'd like to recognize her, I really want to hear how it was. So
Yeah,
perhaps if she
absolutely.
could come
Yeah.
to us
Yeah, after.
later, afterwards in
Sure.
March.
Yeah.
I think that would be the
Yeah, I'm
most
sure she'd be
beneficial for
happy
us. It's all about us and being, what's most, so, excellent. But thank you again for all your work.
My pleasure.
All right, we have a motion by Bill, a second by Carrie. All those in favor? Abstained, denied, nope. Motion passes 600.
Can I just ask something?
Sure, yeah.
Can I just ask you, do you have any December performance coming up?
We sure do.
Here's a
Our-
national audience right here for you.
Exactly.
Well, our fall musical, You're a Good Man, Charlie Brown, opens December 2nd. We run December 2nd and 3rd. That's a Friday and a Saturday night at 7 o'clock. Following that, as Favor said in her report, the Triam Music Honor Society has their Winter Coffee House on Friday, December 16th. That is in the Walpole High School cafeteria, also at 7 o'clock. And then on Wednesdays, December 21st, the Walpole High School Music Department has their winter concert in the Walpole High School Auditorium, also at 7, I believe. So December is a busy month for us.
I just think it's great because there are senior citizens in our community that maybe used to go into Boston. And if we could publicize this, what you do is amazing. And I know that when it gets to be the Pops concert, sometimes the gym is too full to invite community members, but I think this would be a great time to put it into the minutes
Oh,
in
absolutely.
case somebody wants to come and hear a great
Sure.
evening
Yes,
of music.
thank you so much.
Yeah, no, I think it would be well received, so we'll try that too.
Thanks.
Definitely. Thanks, Nancy.
Thanks for coming out.
Of course, my pleasure. Back to parent-teacher conference. Have a good night, everyone.
Thank you. Take care.
Okay, the next order of business is the MCAS presentation.
So Dr. Hahn, Assistant Superintendent, will give an overview.
All right, is it all right if I stay over here? Do you guys want me to move to the table? Am I good here?
You're good.
All right, good. Well, I always appreciate the opportunity to present our Walpole Public Schools MCAS scores. And similar to how I've done in the past, I work with a number of different stakeholders, principals, curriculum leaders, teachers, and some data gurus to best summarize and present on last year's MCAS scores and data. So please note, while this presentation will primarily focus on MCAS results, future school committee meetings and curriculum subcommittee meetings will provide other opportunities to understand and analyze benchmark assessments when department and curriculum leaders come to present on their specific discipline area. And that's something that we, try to do thoughtfully throughout the year, and we'll continue to do that. MCAS results are important, but they're just one way to understand our students' learning and growth in Walpole Public Schools. So we'll continue to provide other opportunities, how we make sense and analyze student learning data in future meetings. Today's presentation is just one piece, albeit a really important piece, on how we measure students' learning and growth. Like last year, this year we will present some challenges and illuminate concerns for student academic growth. Many of you are probably very familiar with some of the national headlines that have referred to the drop in student achievement scores as a result of disrupted schooling during the pandemic. Walpole has experienced similar reductions in scores that we have seen both at the state and national levels. This evening's presentation will certainly reflect data that shows this, but I also want to conclude with how we are moving forward and confident we will continue to meet the needs of our students tomorrow and much further into the future. I normally don't talk at length about this next slide, but I haven't done it in a few years, so I thought I would take a few minutes just to talk about how we analyze and drill down into our data. One of the things that's really important is that I can assure you that the data from our MCAS scores do not sit in a binder and collect dust on a shelf. We spend a great deal of time collecting, aggregating, and analyzing data to determine how we can best meet the needs of our students at the district and school level, and we look at grades, departments, and really actually drill down all the way to teachers. So I won't read the slide bullet by bullet, but I will just point out a few things here. We typically get, for discrepancy reporting purposes, the raw MCAS data in early August. At that time, it's really the responsibility of the principals just to determine that the data is accurate, not necessarily the scores, but who took or who did not take the test to make sure our reporting is accurate. Shortly thereafter, DESE does release an item analysis template, and that template is used both by the schools and the district to start the initial analysis of MCAS scores. It's raw data, it's on a really big spreadsheet, so the analysis template allows us to make a little bit sense of that data. Most of that work is actually done at the district level in my office, and then distributed out to principals and instructional leaders, just to look at overarching themes and major things that stand out about MCAS scores. This year, we were able to do that earlier than we've ever been able to do in years past. We did that in late August, which is exciting for us because it allows our building and district leaders to be more prepared when their teachers arrive and how they're going to drill even further down in the data, which brings us to the next bullet point. MCAS scores and achievement levels are then made available online in early fall and kind of officially released to schools. They are shipped to us in a raw CSV format digitally, but most of us use the DESE Edwin Analytic reporting tool and analysis tool to best analyze the data further. And I'll read this slide because there's a lot to it. We use using Edwin Analytic, district leaders and principals work with instructional leaders and teachers to do a deeper analysis of district, school, and student data. This includes, but is not limited to, subgroup data analysis, learning standards analysis, disaggregated question review, benchmark data comparisons, and curriculum reviews. Plans are created for schools, departments, and teachers as a result of this work. And then finally, MCAS does accountability results are released a little bit after this. And we, as district leaders, we get training on how to interpret the accountability results. This year, most of the training was in how to analyze the scores because they're not giving accountability ratings as they have traditionally in the past. And then shortly thereafter, we release the scores to parents and caregivers, and we actually upload our scores onto Aspen X2 database for people to view there as well, and for teachers to have access to some of the scores. I contemplated including this slide because I don't think the next generation MCAS is really quite new anymore, but I did include it because I thought it was important to note that science last year officially in 9th and 10th grade includes next generation MCAS. So I thought for those at home or for those of you who receive these packets, you would know that and could review what next generation MCAS is, but it's not quite very new anymore for most of our students. Before I dive into the data, which, as you know, if you've looked through the slides, there's a lot of it, I wanted to share how I organized tonight's presentation. So first, I'll share ELA results compared to the state from last year and also a 3-year comparison, and I'll do that for math and science as well. Then we will see how the data is broken up by subgroups, both from 3 to 8 comparison as a summary and 10th grade. Then we'll show that same data by grade level, if you want to dive a little bit deeper on how actual grades did within our district. And finally, I'll share data by comparable towns, which I refer to here as DART data. And in between some of that DART data, I actually give you some sample questions because I know that's been popular in the past for you all to see exactly what our students are being asked. And then finally, I conclude with a summary of findings, action steps, and provide opportunities for any questions that you might have. So to start here, you'll see just a quick comparison between the state and Walpole scores. Most of the scores tonight, just to be clear, are broken up on percentages of meeting and exceeding expectations, partially meeting expectations, or not meeting expectations. As you'll see for ELA, the scores declined in 2022 as compared to 2021 for the state. In particular, writing scores for the state were lower than last year in grades 3 to 8. In addition, grades 3 to 5 showed sharper declines than grades 6 to 8, indicating challenges in early literacy. I do want to point out that's a state analysis. We actually found that, especially in the middle grades, we had a steeper decline than our students in 3 to 5. And you'll see there are some differences in our percentage differences from 2021 into 2022. What's interesting about the state releasing that data is in that training that I told you about earlier, they're very clear that they don't think it's great that we compare 2021 data to 2022 data, and there's a number of reasons for that. One of the most significant reasons is that 2021 data was a single test assessment, different than the 2-day test assessment given in 2022 that's been traditionally given in years past. So they also encourage, and which is why I provided for you, a 3-year data breakdown for students in the district and in the state from 2019, which was the last year we had traditional MCAS test, or before COVID, 2021, which was last year, which is a single MCAS test, and, 2 years ago, or 2022, which is the last school year. You will see here, the bars are for exceeding and meeting expectations in blue, and that yellow orangish color is partially meeting expectations, and the red is not meeting expectations. Those were the 3 to 8 scores, and here are the 10th grade scores for a 3-year comparison. Now taking a look at the state results and the state analysis for math. Compared to 2021, the percentage of students scoring or meeting or exceeding expectations in math started to recover and increased by 6 percentage points in grades 3 to 8. For Walpole, we increased 2 percentage points. The percentage of students across the state for meeting or exceeding expectations in grade 10 declined. In Walpole, a positive we're looking at is actually from 21 to 22, we had a similar 2% increase as compared to our grades 3 to 8. And again, the next 2 slides provide you an opportunity to see that 3-year range or comparison in grades 3 to 8 math and grade 10, comparison as well. And finally, science scores indicated a small recovery in 2022 for the state. This spring was, as I mentioned earlier, the first administration of the next generation high school biology and introductory physics test that our 9th graders typically take. And so we don't have comparable data as we did for math and ELA for high school, and that's the reason why that is not included. There was a 1% increase across the state. You'll see that in 5th grade, we did have a reduction of 6%, but in 8th grade rebounded with a 9% increase in our scores. And to give you a better picture, which the state recommends, again, I highlight for you the 5th grade 3-year comparison, the 8th grade 3-year comparison, the 10th grade scores, as I noted earlier, stand alone. So as I talked about in the slide about analyzing and aggregating data, one of the things that's very, very important to us in Walpole is that we not only look at our overarching scores in each grade by content area, by grade level, and in some cases by teacher, but we also take a look into our subgroups. And while today I provided you information on grades 3 to 8 by subgroup, please know, especially when the data is available, we do a deeper dive by each grade of the subgroups. They're summarized here for a number of different reasons that I can get into later if you're interested. But I want to make sure that everyone here understands that we do dive deeper into actual each grade level, even by school, when it permits. I also want to point out that the earlier slides, I emphasized the percentage of meeting or exceeding expectations. And in these slides, you'll also see we have a mean student growth percentile represented here by SGP. And that's an important measurement for us because students can be compared to themselves or students like them to best measure their growth. The state says that average growth is between 40 to about 55 percentile. Below 40 is below average growth. So when we see SGPs below 40, we tend to do a deeper dive into that information to determine why. So this year, you'll see here in ELA, while our SGP was down across the board, we saw it was down especially with students with disabilities. So we have further discussions in a deeper dive, not only with our MSNs and team chairs, but also with our regular traditional educators. This is the 10th grade by subgroups. Just to note, you'll see blank data here. Data is not included when we do not have a number that I actually don't know the minimum the state uses. I apologize for that. I tried to find that before today's presentation. But where there is no data, we don't have the number to have an identifying data point. This now goes into, if you have questions about how we did by grade, because as I mentioned, I've been summarizing especially grades 3 to 8 across the board, summarized together. This now does a deeper dive into achievement levels by grade. We do here, just for your convenience, have a state comparison. And in a little bit, I'll get into that. We don't always compare ourselves to the state. We do other things to make better comparisons for ourselves. Something that I want to make a note of is I actually think it's worth pointing out that 3 to 5, our SGPs and our achievement levels showed in some cases quite a bit of growth, or at least more of a steady growth model. So sometimes our 3 to 8 averages don't necessarily represent what we believe was some successful literacy programs and successful different approaches in our math and sciences. We are concerned, and I'll talk about this a little bit later, about the dip that we see in 6th and 7th grade, primarily 6th in ELA and 7th grade, both for ELA and math. And I'll talk a little bit more at length about these two areas and what we're doing about them, but I just want to point out that that's where you see, especially in the area of SGP, which obviously impacts achievement level, and meeting and exceeding expectation scores, a dip that we're paying attention to. And even though the state did, and the training call that we were on, talked that 7th grade, the middle grade, did experience the more significant dip across the state, here in Walpole, we are concerned about that, and spending a lot of time talking about that in our curriculum meetings. Finally, the last piece of data analysis that I give is our achievement in ELA, math, and science, technology, and engineering compared to our DART districts. All districts in Massachusetts are assigned comparison districts based on percentile ranks of total enrollment, percentage of low-income students, percentage of L students, and percentage of students with disabilities. Each district has fixed comparison group in any given year, but the next year's enrollment data may generate a slightly different group. And the reason why I point that out is we may not have been a comparable or DART district with some of these towns in 2019 as we are today. So the information we pulled is based on the DART districts from 2022. Among districts, comparison groups are not static. Districts comparable to your selected district will have their own comparison groups that may not completely overlap. In other words, you might look up one of these towns and look at their DART districts or their comparable groups, and Walpole may not be on it. I'm not sure why. I just wanted to point that out in case anyone digs deeper into DART or comparable districts. So from a district level, I spent a lot of time looking at what I would say our comparable towns in the analysis tool that DESE provides. This is an area that I think sometimes gives us a little bit more of a narrowed focus or an accurate focus of how we should be doing as a district. You'll see the results for ELA achievement. Oh, sorry, I don't want to go there yet. For math achievement and for STA show varying degrees of sometimes where we outperform districts like us and sometimes where we underperform. We also spend time looking at our SGP scores to see where we perform as compared to districts like us. The next slide, and I thought about, in hindsight, I think both ways about I should have maybe gone through all the district and showed this after, but I did want to spend some time giving people an opportunity, because I got positive feedback about this from actually parents last year who really like seeing examples of questions that our students receive. So these are actual questions, just to be clear, that were on the MCAS assessment last year. So if you have a student in 3rd, 8th, or 10th grade, they would have received these actual questions. And so what I want to point your attention to, if you haven't had an opportunity, is to glance at these questions. And not only for ELA, but also for math and for STE, I think one of the things that will stick out to you and sticks out to many of our parents is really the level of rigor and the complexity that our students are asked and have to answer for MCAS assessment. As many of you are already aware, the MCAS assessment is oftentimes used as the model of one of the most rigorous assessments given across the nation. The other thing that this slide doesn't show very well, because we tried to put all the questions onto one slide, is that if you look below the bolded question, let's say for grade level 3, where it says, read this story and passage about the growth of a forest, then answer the questions that follow. There's two passages. It says read the story and the passage. So there's two tabs there. One that says a grand old tree, and the other says how the forest grew. And our students actually have to toggle between those two tabs and read both stories. And then they have to answer this question. Based on a grand old tree and how the forest grew, write a paragraph that explains how trees are important to animals. Support your response with important details from the story and the passage. This is a question for students in grade 3. Now, what I didn't do last year, but what I decided to do this year is to give you a sample of what a score, these are two Walpole students, what a score, what a student's essay, how a student essay is scored. Geez, I apologize. And I do this just for this one question because then I'll explain why in a second. So if you go to the next slide, you will see that these are actually two responses from two of our students. The top response, and these are considered short essay questions, I should be clear about this, so they're scored from 0 to 3, is scored a 2. And you'll see in that question, there actually is quite a bit of detail, and the student really spends a considerable amount of time summarizing and trying to put details in from both the stories. But I believe the scorer ultimately doesn't believe that the student explains how trees are important to animals. So while the second answer is shorter, it received a higher item score of 3 because the belief is that student did more to answer that question using references from both texts. So that's a third grader. Now I have a second grader, a fourth grader, and a seventh grader at home, and I was excited that the Massachusetts believes our third grade students have the ability to answer these questions. But the reason why I wanted to point it out was to show you that not only is it a really rigorous question, but even just having access to the technology and understanding how to toggle between these two tabs can sometimes get in the way of some of our students' ability to answer a question. That's certainly not unique to Walpole, but that is something that we consider as we prepare students for MCAS. And I will talk a little bit about specifically that, preparing students for MCAS a little bit later in this presentation. The next slide is similar to the ELA achievement for START districts. It's really hard for me to just overarchingly summarize these slides because there's so much data and there's so much information. So a side of me wants to say, in some ways, this is more favorable in grades 3 to 8 than it is for grade 10. But when you actually dive in, they're just all very similar. There are some discrepancies with some communities in our scores, and others tend to be pretty consistent across the board. So here are this time we provide 4 examples of questions in grade 3, 5, 8, and 10. And what I want to point out for these questions is these are sample short answer math questions. So these are not what a lot of us are used to with traditional state and national benchmark assessments where we're used to multiple choice. The student has to just put in their answer into those boxes. In other words, you can't even guess and be right, really, in these examples. And I thought that's really, really again, rigorous approach for our students for the short answer math questions. And finally, here is an STE achievement for DART districts. You'll see that what is not comparable here is high school. Again, that's related to the next generation being new, so they didn't do the DART district analysis for that grade. And then again, we provide for you here this time just 2 sample questions. And we chose these 2 questions because they are multiple part questions, and you'll see each of them in both 5th and 8th grade have 3 parts. And if you're like me, you've quizzed yourself to determine if you could answer these questions. And I get stumped, even with the 5th grade ones, have to think a lot about them. So I want to go back to one of my initial slides that I started, and it's been a really daunting year to not only to analyze Walpole's MCAS scores, but also just to read the national headlines, really the international headlines if you look beyond the states. And we know that there is a lot of really alarming headlines and concerns. I saw one the other day that I didn't include in here about how this data might have an impact on students' long-term, incomes and ability to make money. And a lot of this can be, for me in my position and for many of our educators and certainly for our community members and parents, really, really concerning. And so I wanted to bring it back to two quotes that I thought at least had an impact on me from the Massachusetts Education Secretary and then the U.S. Secretary of Education. And the first one points out that, just to be clear, pandemic recovery is not something that we approach here in Walpole as a short-term or one-year problem. We know that many of our students, if not all of our students, are going to need more time. And they're going to need not only more time to catch up on their learning, but also to receive tutoring, intervention services, acceleration academies, early literacy, after-school programs, or like we're excited about, summer learning programs that we offer to all students. But I really love this last quote, that while the recent data is alarming, catching up our students to the 2019 achievement levels is our low bar. We must aim higher. Our students should be leading the world. And I think a lot about that when we frame and talk about this MCAS data, that I don't want to just have it in a silo where we think about it, we have to catch our students up to 2019. What we have to do is ensure that our students are leaders of learners. And so some of the same conversations we had in 2017 and 18 are true for today. In other words, I don't want to be stifled by this idea that we're just simply trying to catch up. Certainly, as we build a new middle school and as we evaluate our curriculum, we are certainly trying to do a lot more. So finally, the last three slides, I talk a little bit about some of our takeaways and how we are responding. Please understand, even as I practice this presentation this evening, I think constantly about what was omitted or more of what we learned. We're always learning from our MCAS data and really from all of our student learning data. We know that our MCAS scores, as we reviewed here, followed some of the statewide and national trends with drops in exceeding and meeting expectation scores. And certainly there were variations based on grade levels and tests. And that drop, I should be clear, I didn't reflect it here, I apologize, I mean according to 2019, not to a 2021 comparison. Besides for a few expectations, subgroups did not experience an increased percentage drop in scaled achievement scores as compared to all students. So let me explain this. I'm not presenting this just so everyone knows as necessarily a celebration or, oh, this is wonderful news, but I do want to point out that we know nationally there were subgroups or high-need students that had more significant drops in their own comparative data. And actually in Walpole, we did an analysis and we didn't see that to be true. In other words, our subgroups had a very similar drop as compared to all students. Again, we have to close the gap in many areas of our subgroup data. So I want to be very clear on why I'm sharing that. That's more just as a comparison to 2019, not that we are right where we want to be with our high-need students. But worth pointing out because that's part of our analysis. We did narrow the gap in some areas according to SGP with some of our high-need students. We were pleased with some of our L-score SGPs as compared to years past. Again, I went back and forth of including this because subgroup and improvements in some of our high needs is really also an area of focus for us. But I do want to point out that we don't look at our subgroup as just one big data point. We dive deep into each one. As I mentioned, we had a significant, what I'm calling a significant dip in 6th and 7th grade scores in achievement data. In ELA, students underperformed in long writing prompts. Actually, depending on the grade level, that was true for short writing prompts as well. In math, middle school scores demonstrated less gains as compared to benchmark diagnostic assessments. So this was interesting, and I talk about this at a later slide as well. But we perform better on our benchmarking diagnostics, which also have state and national benchmarking comparisons. It's important to make that note. We don't just analyze our benchmarks in isolation and then do MCAS both state and national. The benchmarking we use, we can compare to both, and we perform better. So we're talking about why that is now. The SE, and this is true for last year as well, the Science, Technology, and Engineering 8th grade MCAS results identify a gap in technology standards in the middle school, which is not totally surprising as we continue to talk about technology standards and how they align with our science standards. And then we do continue to outperform the state averages and show comparable, although low average scores with DART districts. So how do we respond? So I have two slides on this. The first slide really prioritizes two major points. One is, as I mentioned, You heard a lot last year about the acceleration roadmap, but it's worth noting that we did not and do not approach the acceleration roadmap as a one-year priority. It is meant for multiple years. So we continue to foster a sense of belonging and partnership. We continue to look at our attendance data to determine if our students are showing up. Tonight's presentation is about MCAS, but we know that the state and national data showed that students didn't come to school last year. While Walpole did not experience as significant of issues with attendance, we know how important it is for students to feel like they belong in order to ensure that they're walking through our doors every day, because we know being present impacts their learning. We continue to implement multi-tiered systems of support, oftentimes referred to as MTSS or RTI, to monitor student understanding in real time. One of the biggest issues with MCAS results, and I'll mention this again probably in the next slide, is that we get these results months after the students take them. Therefore, it does not allow us in real time to give student feedback. So we have to have a system that does that through formative, combative, and stronger benchmark assessments throughout the year. And then finally, that is true also for the third priority, which is just-in-time scaffolds when they're needed. In other words, students are getting feedback immediately. This was similar to last year in our adjustments when teaching writing across all grade levels, but we did make some changes, especially in grades 3 to 5 and grades 6 to 8. We want to create more writing prompts that are consistent with MCAS examples that are integrated as part of the Reader's Workshop units of study. In other words, I am against teaching to the test. I never want to flood our students with 15 MCAS questions because we want them to do well in MCAS. However, we do want our students to see MCAS-like questions or questions with the level of rigor of MCAS in the curriculum that we deliver. So we're always looking at that and considering how we can make our questions more rigorous or reflect the MCAS. We do, just to be clear when I say we don't teach the test, we do prep our students on how to toggle between two tabs. We do those things, but I'm talking about more the academic learning piece. In 6th to 8th grade, we're continuing to increase our student writing opportunities, improve our writing rubrics so our students have more consistent expectations across grade levels and across content areas. We have a consistent writing composition notebook that's being implemented this year and common inference assessments, all specifically in reflection and response to some of the MCAS data that we have. And this is similar to last year in 9th and 10th grade, increased writing prompts that align with MCAS. Again, similar to what I say in grades 3 to 5, but in the examples of narrative, editorial, persuasive and informative writing, and include more synthesis across multiple levels. I dive in a little bit deeper to many bullet points, and I hope this wasn't too much, but I just wanted to give you guys a sense of how much we think about these scores and what they mean to us as a district. I've spoken at length already about this first bullet point, and that's looking at the district-wide benchmark diagnostic assessments and how they compare to our MCAS scores, and what does that tell us? Like I said, MCAS we get months after the student has taken the assessment. Good benchmarking and diagnostic assessments give us real-time data and information, so aligning and seeing how those two speak to each other is crucial and really important. We want to improve our Tier 2 instructional strategies, especially with our high-need students at Title I schools, where this year we've been able to increase staffing in our Title I schools. But we also consider how we can improve our Tier 2 instruction for our non-Title I schools. Just as an anecdote or as an example, providing a new ESP at the Elm School, we've seen a significant increase in L students. We have explicit word study instruction in grades 4 to 5 to improve reading comprehension skills as a continuation of our foundations curriculum in grades K to 3. We will continue to offer summer enrichment program for all students K to 8, and that will continue to be free. I will note that we didn't do a comparative analysis of the summer program because this was only our second year of the program, of the first year that we've done MCAS, so we just didn't think the program would give us necessarily a good indication, but next year we plan on doing that. We'll continue to rewrite parts of department common assessments to ensure a level of rigor that reflects MCAS questions. I think I've spoken at length of that as we've gone through this. This is an important one that I haven't talked about in years past, but comes up quite often, and that's introducing concepts early in the year that are typically taught after MCAS is administered. This primarily happens in math and in science. So for instance, I gave one example here. We know that the standards rooted in functions has been taught traditionally after MCAS is given in 8th grade. Well, that makes it very difficult for our students to always do well if they haven't been taught something. But we run into a bit of a conundrum because MCAS is given relatively early in the spring. And to assume we can just give every standard before that is taught, you really have to pick and choose. So we're talking right now with our math leaders about how we can at least introduce more of the vocabulary and the language like functions before the test is given, before MCAS is given, even if we're still going to teach the majority of the standard after. So that's an ongoing conversation. We are working to improve our instructional coaching, as we've invested so much in instructional coaching through professional development. The focus of that PD is to improve how we can provide targeted and real-time teacher growth and development to improve student learning. Improve collaboration between math and science departments to ensure consistent curriculum and language and vocabulary in the areas that I've talked about here. That was in here last year and something that we're continuing to work on. Address gaps identified in middle school science and technology curriculum. This is where we have science standards and we have technology and engineering standards, and we're always in conversation about who is responsible and who is teaching which standards and where do we see the gaps. We continue the growth and development of our equity task forces. We know to meet the needs of all of our students, but especially some of those students identified in the subgroups, to be a more culturally responsive teachers and to have an improved culturally responsive classrooms. And then, as always, I've ended with this bullet point at looking back at my MCAS presentations that just maintain the district's mission of educating all students to achieve success. In other words, do we believe every student has the right to learn and absolutely can learn? And we must, as a district, believe the answer to that is yes. And that's why I go back to that quote, that we are not just catching up, we are working so our students are leaders of learning. So I know that I provide you guys with so much data. Every year it's a challenge to know what's relevant, what's helpful. I can provide, if you have questions or you're seeking more breakdown, I'd be happy to do that. And like I said, our belief, and Dr. Goff and I speak about this, is that this is a pretty big, wide picture of the MCAS data, but we really, when we meet with our curriculum leaders who will present to you later in the year, we talk to them about incorporating data points, incorporating exemplars of learning, how do we measure student success, in addition to curriculum changes or new approaches to pedagogies or new things we're buying in our classroom. And I tried to highlight in that beginning so you know that we are committed to that. So with that said, I think I've done enough talking. I will stop and let you guys ask any questions and do my best to answer.
Thank you. As always, very comprehensive, and I appreciate not only the data, but the response to the data, the things that we're looking at and the things that we're continuing to address. Any questions? Ms. Galvin?
Just a couple. That is an awful lot of good information. I think it's just important for us to do this because people worry about their kids and, gaps, and how I think this shows that regardless of whether we were going through COVID or not, as an administration and as a district, you take it very seriously to look at how children are doing and set goals for how you can, be accountable to the main mission of what we do. So I look at this as it's really pretty good information. I mean, it's a positive story too, that there are dips, but when you compare, I think the only real comparison that is useful is some of the DART information, because like you said, you can't compare to last year's data. You can't compare to a traditional old-fashioned MCAS. There's been a lot of changes.
Yes, there have.
But when we look at the comparisons, we're holding our own. Mm-hmm. That doesn't mean, that we're thrilled with everything, but we're okay. And I think that's, in general, what parents need to hear and need to know. I'm wondering about your opinion on the student growth percentiles, because philosophically, I completely get it. We want to just see kids improving. It doesn't matter that they're, the best in the class, but if they've done a lot of improvement, that's a huge celebration. What I don't understand sometimes is when you compare, if you look, like, I'm looking at the page for math MCAS DART districts.
Okay.
And in the first column, when we look at our scores compared to the other districts in 2022, we're towards the high end of the middle, if you ask me, with a 60% of our students in meets or exceeds percentile.
Yep, you're looking at 10th grade, correct?
I'm looking at grades 3 through 8.
Okay, sorry.
Sorry.
Yep, I got you.
Should have
now.
made that
Yep.
clear.
I'm
And this
with
is
you now.
just as an example, Bill.
Yep.
But I'm looking at that, and then I go across to the student growth percentile, and our growth appears to be the least. So part of me says, you can't just look at the numbers. Like, it's telling, and it's probably more telling to you as somebody who is doing, as you say, the deeper dives. But if somebody was just looking at the data and saying, well, we didn't grow as much as the other towns, you kind of have to look at it comprehensively. But in general, do you feel like the student growth percentile is useful to the work that you do? I guess that's my question.
Yeah, it's a terrific question. I use it across all the analysis, but I especially use it in when we're trying to talk, which we do often, about closing achievement gaps, because you're never just going to go from one year to the next and have let's say a subgroup that you need to improve on, where the achievement gap is much lower. You're never going to, typically the next year, all of a sudden that achievement gap's closed. But what you hope for is that the growth is more accelerated for those students who might be scoring lower.
Okay.
So to your point, or like a general, especially a 3 to 8 like this,
Right.
DART comparison, I want to make sure we're in the ballpark. But to be honest with you, as someone who looks at this data often, a 1 point difference on a student score could have like a 6% percentile difference on there. So I'm a firm believer, which Desi recommends, like careful comparing like a 49 to a 51, because you want to compare average growth. So there are some areas where we're in the 30s, and now I'm like, that's a problem. We are doing something that we need to really we need to consider, or we're not doing something is more likely that we need to consider. And then there are times where we're in the 60s to 65 range, and I want to have a similar discussion. Well, what are we doing? One area that we see this, if I'm talking too much, tell me, but we see traditionally, especially before 2022 and COVID, you can go back and look, and we have a pretty high SGP in 6th grade math.
Yeah.
You can see that happen the exact year that we gave double math in 6th grade. So you can assume that it's probably really hard to keep that acceleration from 6th to 7th grade. And so there is some discussion, are we having a rebound effect in 7th grade? And our SGP goes from like a 60, I think it was like a 65 average one year to, I'm kind of off the top of my head, but like in the low 40s, And so we do talk about those very things, which is why the state always recommends looking at achievement data, looking at actually raw scores, which we do, and then looking at SGP to try to tell the whole picture. So I don't know if that answers your question, but I get the point you're making, and we consider that.
No, it does, and I think it also sort of just points out to the general public that it's, the big picture has to be looked at a lot more carefully. Like like you say, if this is data about grades 3 to 8, that's a really wide lens that you're looking at.
Yeah, and we just dig so deep, like we do our own analysis even outside Edwin Analytics. So I can tell you to the teacher's score, I can tell you how our students performed on their long comp compared to other teachers in their building, to other schools, to the district, to the state averages. And so we try to look at that and to determine a story we're trying to tell. And when you do that, you can really see You can see data that stands out, and that's typically where you try to build your story and then build your responses around. And that's not always negative. Sometimes it's really positive, to be clear.
Yeah, definitely. So one other question. In your, like, recommendations towards the end, one of the things you talked about is increasing the level of rigor in, I think it was common assessment, so that it reflects the MCAS-type questions.
Yep.
I think at the high school level, we should also be doing that, going towards the SAT.
Okay,
Because both of those are comprehensive type tests, as opposed to, and I know we do more than just taking an end of the chapter test, but, you know, I just think that at the high school, that's the standard that we should be also asking our teachers to do. I think it'll make a difference.
Yep. Thank you.
But thank you, that was really good.
Thanks for the information, Bill. I just have a couple
Sure.
questions about the action items. For the summer enrichment program, I know that that program is open to any family that wants to sign up as long as there's space. Do we do any targeted invitations to the program? We do.
Yeah, so we do it in two ways, and I didn't even let you finish, I apologize. I
No.
got excited to say yes.
I knew,
So we
you
do it in
knew where
two-
I was going.
Yeah, we do it in two ways. So I'll be specific here. So for instance, we have Title I evenings in the spring that leaders of our summer program attend to help and sign parents up at that event. We have those same presenters attend the L Family Night that was very specific and targeted with translators to help parents sign up if they wanted to. And then that's the first way, so attending events that some of those families or some of those students might need support in accessing the program. The second way we do it is we do send out a letter to teachers saying that, like, we're sending this out through Principal E-Notes, through maybe Dr. Goff's superintendent. If you have a student who you think would really benefit, please contact that family, because we know that the power of the teacher reaching out can go a long way. So I don't have a good measurement, although maybe we could add to the form, you know, did a teacher recommend you? But that's kind of the second way that we try to promote it to specific families.
Okay, yeah, thank you. My other question is just about something that you referenced early on about the logistical difficulties in navigating an online test platform, especially for the younger elementary students who don't have as much experience with it. And I am 100% on board with you saying that we don't want to be teaching to the test, but I'm wondering, do we get feedback from students or from teachers about how the logistics might impede their ability to actually show what they know? And do we give them opportunities to practice those elements of test taking?
Yeah, that's a great question. And that's actually where I try to go back to, like, well, we do teach, like, test taking skills. And so first thing is that MCAS releases, actually it's available for parents now who wanted to practice, but MCAS does release practice tests through the Pearson format, so students can actually interact with the test and some of its tools in the way they would on the test day. Beyond that, which all of our students participate in, all of our teachers implement, we do like formal days where that stuff is there. Beyond that, we have also, I didn't put in the bullet points because we've been doing it for a few years, but increasing intentionally students to fill out assessment answers or test answers in boxes. We've also had an increase of benchmarking assessments over the years. So even like our new math, our Bridges curriculum, we use a complementary online tool that helps us analyze the data, but then also gives students an extra step to take more tests online. So we're trying to increase that in general as well. What we don't see a lot, and teachers, so you asked, do teachers speak up about this, what sort of feedback we get, is that toggling between two tabs. And besides that Pearson test, that's the one thing that everyone's talking a lot about, like how do we recreate that? And I don't know if I have a great answer right here, right now about that. Again, because they do get that in the Pearson practice, but that's a really tough one to kind of recreate. Because I think, to be honest with you, most companies are like, never would I do it that way, because that's really confusing. It can be really
And how many
confusing.
adults have multiple monitors in their work
Yes,
environment to
yes.
avoid exactly that scenario,
That exact
right?
thing,
And
yeah.
we probably don't have money in the budget, Mike, to get second monitors for every kid.
For every kid. Yeah, and that's the one slide that it doesn't even do it justice. You know, even the just keep in mind, you're toggling between two tabs, and the text box is like to the left of the question box. So it's not even like a big screen that pops up or super obvious that you would interact with.
Yeah.
So nevertheless for third graders, but
And we can't solve for everything, right? But I think it's important for people to keep
Yeah.
in mind too, that there's a lot of, like, those extra layers that kind of sometimes may get in the way
Yeah.
of students fully demonstrating what they're capable of. But it sounds like we're doing the best we can
yeah, try.
to mitigate that.
I'm
So-
always willing and open to feedback around that from
Yeah.
folks, because that's a little bit of a different problem, right, than like just simply learning.
Yeah, exactly. Thank you. Sean, did you have questions?
Yeah, thank you for the explanation on SGP a little bit. That was something that was highlighted for me, looking at the whole picture as something to consider, especially as we're, in recovery. It seems like other districts may be recovering, a little quicker. I was wondering if that's a fair assessment of that, and just seeing how, the SGP scores for the DART districts have come from. Even the, previous years, we tend to be kind of on the lower end in SGP.
Yeah, so if I could speak to SGPs, and I didn't say this with Nancy's, although I should have, because I don't want to minimize SGP, because I do think it tells a really important picture, like I said, for our subgroups or for those we're trying to close the achievement gap. I also just make a note that like 2021's SGPs, there were a lot of questions about their authenticity because there was no comparative data. So that's like the first thing. So I don't even remember the formula, but it was so complicated that we sat on a training call trying to understand it. They said that 2022 is improved because we have 2021 data, but when 2021 data is imperfect, it's still not a perfect comparative tool. To your point, however, there are towns that, I think are catching up quicker in the same way that we have some areas that we demonstrated growth that other communities did. We were pleasantly surprised by our 10th grade growth from 2021 to 2022 in math. That was positive. A massive jump in STE in 8th grade. And so that's actually one of the things they really stressed to us in the training, was like to find your little stories, of both loss and where we've had acceleration. So most definitely, I think there's some districts that have had accelerations in some areas better than we have. At Job Alikes, we've talked about this, in the tech Job Alikes that I sit on. And there's been nothing yet that I've been like, oh, that's something that we need to consider, or we need to think about doing. But there certainly are, for full transparency, there are districts that are, I think, probably accelerating quicker than we are, as shown by the DART district data, excuse me.
Yeah, and I think, one of the highlights of the presentation, at least for me, was in your response. You talked about how you've targeted specific areas to grow, and, that's really my favorite part, is how you and the rest of the district and building administrators really dive into the data. And, you're not just leaving us with the data, but you're leaving us with what, you've started to do this school year and what you plan on doing, which, I think is actually fairly unique and, transparent. I love to see that. My only other question in the response section, the only program, at least in my understanding, that exists outside of a school day is the summer enrichment program. Are there any plans in the works or any thoughts of doing some sort of boost or acceleration type class ahead of MCAS, or even, spaced out throughout the year to provide students additional opportunities to access learning in a structured environment to help them? I think that was kind of what Secretary Pizer was alluding to in that quote.
Yeah, you talked about the vacation kind of enrichment opportunities. No, not right now, but I think it's a really fair question. I think it's when we initially sent, and this was 2 years ago, when we initially sent community feedback around like some of these things, the summer was the most popular. But I think it's a really fair point, and certainly something I can look into to see if there would be an appetite from families and community members to participate in something either during the February or spring vacation time.
Yeah, or even, I was even thinking before, after the school day, that involves some parent transportation, but even targeting a specific group of students that is struggling, a couple of days of specific standard-based things throughout the week. Just that extra time in front of an instructor is really
Yeah.
valuable.
And we do have, because I might have misunderstood you a little bit, I do want to make sure I point out, we do have some students in some programs that remain beyond the school day, either directed, but I don't know as formal, as comprehensive, as we can be.
Other questions or comments? Thank you very much.
Thanks.
Much appreciated, Jill. Next order of business is an overview of the FY '24 budget timeline.
Want me to jump in, Bridget?
Sure, go
All right.
Fine.
A little winded, though. It was a good presentation, but a lot of information. Well, So, I just want to read a little bit about the budget timeline and our effort to educate people about our budget, and it has its complexities, and just kind of talk through a higher level view of our budget and its timeline. So as far as the process goes, we're at the beginning of our annual budget timeline when the school committee and our administrative team meet to begin discussions for the FY '24 budget. The budget process is an exhaustive review of all aspects of the school department's operating budget, in addition to grants and revolving accounts. The process includes workshops and public hearings that allow for an intimate review of both the goods and service and personnel budgets. This year's challenge in particular is inflation, which has caused an escalation in many areas of the goods and service budget, and our ability to maintain level budgets in these areas is no longer an option. So we have a long history of remaining level budget in goods and services. We can no longer continue that. This year, we will be addressing the significant rising costs that impact all of the school supply budgets, as well as our centralized district operations that have historically grown at a predictable and steady pace. These items must be accounted for prior to any other increases to ensure that the critical needs of our district are met. These are very operational, fundamental basics that need to be accounted for. Along with these new challenges, we will need to budget for our traditional collective bargaining obligations that impact our personnel portion of the budget. Once the personnel and goods and services needs have been satisfied, we will review the new challenges that have arisen this year and will need to be accounted for in the FY '24 budget. So a little bit about the budget timeline. Although the timeline we are reviewing this evening begins in November and concludes at the beginning of May, the budget is an ongoing conversation year-round as we find ourselves managing the current fiscal year's needs as well as planning for the next year's budget development. Our budget cycle also includes capital budgeting that begins in late May and concludes in September as we approach the fall town meeting. So when you think about the budget timeline that's in your packet that we're going to talk about, when it concludes in May, it really doesn't conclude in May. It continues through the summer with a capital portion of our budget, which leads into the fall town meeting, and then, again, you repeat the cycle, all right? So it's ongoing is my theme, I guess, of that message. So for the viewing audience, just to walk through our budgets timeline and what we are doing and incrementally where. So in early November, we release our budget templates to the principals, so that's our goods and service budgets. We have a workshop in early December where we sit down, the school leadership with the school committee, and we go through just things in a general, high-level view of what the needs are of the district, what we're seeing maybe coming up that's new that we haven't talked about, new initiatives, just an open-ended kind of workshop environment to talk about things that need to be addressed and that we'd like to consider for the coming fiscal year. Still, again, in early December, the principals and directors have a justification sheets which explain each item within their goods and service budget, and that is due in early December. And then by December 12th, around mid-December, the superintendent and I sit down and we meet with all the administrators to review their budgets and go through them and kind of fine-tune what messaging we've already delivered, because we're already talking about budgets in our leadership meetings at this point in the year. So then as we cross over the new year into January, the school committee will receive in early January their goods and service budget books. So you guys start to review those budgets and think about questions that you have. That leads into our first budget hearing, which is on camera, and the community is welcome to attend these meetings, where we talk about initially goods and services and capital improvement requests and things of that sort, those bare bones, but those things this year, which are going to be challenging because of the inflationary environment that I mentioned earlier. As we get through mid-January, we'll have a second public hearing where we tend to focus on personnel. What kinds of needs are we seeing out there, maybe related to student enrollments, needs of students in particular programs, just the natural evolution of the school department, or in some cases, the needs may decrease, and we may have extra funding available, and talking about what do we want to do with the allocation of those funds. If need be, we can have a third hearing around January, mid-January. And then, as the budget process wraps up, we finalized our discussions, feel like we're in a pretty good spot at that point. At the end of January, the school committee votes their FY24 tentative budget. And that will set us on the path to town meeting, which is generally the first Monday, I believe, in May, where the budget will be voted through. So this is our operating budget, obviously our most critical part of the school department budget process. And I think we're right on track. We're actually earlier this year with some of the steps. I think we felt like we were a little bit behind last year, just the natural progression with the town and town administrator. So we've come out of the gate. We've actually released our budget templates to the principals early. We've talked about the process that we want to use this year with the inflation and factoring that in. So I think we're well prepared. We're off to a good start. So happy to answer any questions you might have.
Mr. Buckley.
Through you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Mr. Fisher. I appreciate you restraining your giddiness at the beginning of your favorite season. I especially like that you begin the budget template to principals on the Monday of Thanksgiving week. That's a nice touch. I guess
Rigor.
it's rigor. This is a great timetable which we've operated under since time immemorial, and that's great. But I have, I think, two questions. One is, I know we. And one observation that you did not capture in the schedule is all the other additional meetings we have with the Finance Committee. Sometimes we come before the Select Board as well to discuss the budget. I know we are due before them, and in the last sort of go-around, there was a discussion about the desire to meet collectively with the three major boards in town, ourselves, the Select Board, and the Finance Committee. And I know we're doing that the week after Thanksgiving. I know that has sort of a capital tint to it, but I guess I was interested in perhaps is that a space as well to talk about sort of general budget needs? Because I know in Walpole there's like a 3-day window between it being too early to talk about the budget and then the budget have already been finalized. So we want to be highly aware of that. But I think it just shows, I feel like truly that this department in particular does the most comprehensive exercise, and I think we continue to have a lot of moving parts. So that was my number one question. My number two question is, when do you start to get sort of the indicators, whether it be through your professional association of MASBO or through sort of town administration, number one, where, say, new growth is looking, and free cash, obviously that's a later thing, but also where perhaps some of the state circuit breaker and the like, is there talk amongst your colleagues now to say, okay, circuit breaker is going to be okay, and we'll obviously this budget cycle, inflation is going to be the major driving factor, hopefully one of the few. So I guess just if you could set that sort of table as well, I think that would be helpful.
So I think it's early in the game at this point to get definitive indications of where we are budget-wise. As far as circuit breaker goes, we have our own projections that have come together for next year's projection. So I feel good about internally where we are with that. I think the state is just trying to counterbalance the inflation and looking to increase funding to the towns through the per pupil Chapter 70 reimbursement. We're seeing indications early on of that. So we're hoping that will be helpful, although we don't necessarily rely on that for our budgets. It's more our workings with the town itself. I think a lot of these things that you've mentioned evolve over time, and it's just really, I think you mentioned ongoing process, right? So it's trying to have a lot of conversations with ourselves, the boards, the other boards in town, but a lot of it is Bridget and I going down and talking with Jim and trying to keep relations positive. And then Jim looking to share with us the new growth and stuff, but that's generally a little bit later. But I agree with your point that the budget tends to come together very quickly, and I think that's what I was intending to explain, that we're trying to be out in front of it. If we're at the door prepared, when that announcement's made, we can adjust because we have all the factors in place. And I've been working with my office to get earlier projections for our personnel budget, which is the largest portion of our budget. So actually, Mark and I were talking today, we're just about done with personnel projections. I mean, that's something that we haven't worked on until much later in the budget season in the past, but no reason why we couldn't do it early. So I think we will be much better prepared this year and look forward to any indications we're getting, but not a lot of information out there at this point.
I think that's great, and again, through you, Madam Chair, the only other, I know you've been girding us a lot with a lot of information ahead of that sort of joint board meeting, but if you could maybe do a little historical analysis for us. I recall, we've been, as you say, we've been level funding goods and services for a long time. It would be great to have the historical perspective, say, this is an area that's probably gonna jump in our budget that we have for the last 4 or 5 or maybe longer years. I remember the last time we talked about the need to sort of goose the goods and services portion of the budget, because previously we had left it stagnant for a long time. So it seems like there's sort of an elastic effect where we can get away with that for a number of years, and we're maybe at the end of that. So that would be good to be able to say, we haven't had this need, and we've been able to live within this portion of our budget for 5, 6 cycles now. But
I would just, to clarify that, it's the school's budgets that we've held on as far as the centralized budgets, the bus contracts and things like that. They definitely have increased over time.
Right.
Utilities is another one we're looking at, right? We're all of us, all departments in town are
Right,
looking
yeah.
closely at that.
Excellent.
Other questions or comments? Thank you very much, Mr.
Excellent.
Fisher. All right. Superintendent report.
All right. Still with me here? It's all right.
We'll start at 6:45.
I'm really glad that Kendra mentioned the musical, You Good Man, Charlie Brown, that's in a few weeks, so hopefully I can attend that. She sent an invitation, so that is, yes, Friday, 12/2, or Saturday, 12/3, and they are both at 7 o'clock. It's great to attend some of the MIA playoffs, the boys soccer and the field hockey. I saw many people there. And we've got a couple of good events this weekend. We have the championship field hockey game on Saturday. I believe that's at 11 o'clock at Burlington. And then we also, I believe we have the cross-country all-state championship, which is the same day.
Yeah.
But that's at Fort Devens, so.
Fort Devens, 2 and
Location's not-
2:30-ish.
2:30, so you can go to 11 o'clock field hockey and get over to
Yeah.
Fort Devens for the 2:30.
Halfway there.
There you go.
Sort of.
I wanted to just do a couple more staff congrats. I know that Mr. Kajowski is going to be here to be recognized next time as the state finalist for the Presidential Award for Excellence in Math and Science Teaching. I also wanted to congratulate Coach Dave Wall. This past Sunday, he was recognized as the Division II Coach of the Year for girls basketball. They had announced it in the spring, but Sunday was the actual recognition. And then also a congrats to Coach Barry Greener. He was inducted into the Massachusetts chapter of the National Wrestling Hall of Fame. So that was a nice honor for him. Also, Nancy Gallivan and I attended the MASC-MASS conference. That's the Massachusetts Association of School Committee and the Massachusetts Association of School Superintendents. It's really the largest annual gathering of educational leaders in Massachusetts. So it really consists of diverse professional development and some opportunities, and it gives us an in-depth discussion of these critical issues that we face today. And it affords us also the opportunity to collaborate and to be able to network with other superintendents and other school committee members as well. So it's a nice event. I also wanted to thank the Langley Foundation. Throughout the school year, Mara Pastran, a board-certified licensed musical therapist, is going to provide music enrichment to our students, all of our students at Daniel Feeney Preschool. These 45-minute bi-monthly visits will incorporate not only music and instruments, but gross and fine motor movements, social emotional learning, listening skills, and self-regulation. This really is an incredible opportunity funded by the Langley Foundation, whose mission is in part to support school initiatives that promote social and emotional well-being. And the Walpole Public School District is thankful for the support, again, for the Langley Foundation, specifically Diane and Jack Langley for making this possible. I also wanted to let the school committee know that I've applied for Walpole Public School to participate in a learning cohort on trauma-responsive practices for school mental health. I know there's been some requests to have some staff professional development for that. So it's called the Thriving Minds Team. They partner with the Massachusetts Health Consortium that, thanks to Carrie, we've been able to become a member of. So what that does is it expands opportunities for us to learn through trauma-responsive practices, through professional development sessions. So I completed the application to be part of this learning cohort, and they aim to recruit individuals from diverse geographic areas within Massachusetts, so we'll see if we're selected. So it's worth throwing our hat in the ring and see if we can be a part of that. Family survey time. We'll be asking families to complete a family-school relationship survey. To administer the survey, we've partnered with Panorama Education. We're using Panorama as a pilot this year. We really want to see what data we're able to target from them. Their questions enable us to compare to national norms, which is nice. If people have older children they tend to recommend that you complete the survey for your eldest child, but they say that you can take it multiple times if you choose. So I'm thanking families ahead of time because we know that they're a valuable resource of information as we work to create the best learning environment for our students. So what I'm doing, because it comes from Panorama, it doesn't necessarily come from me, I can manipulate a little bit of what it says. So as soon as I hit it, it'll do a blast out to families with a code, so that everybody gets a code. So I've asked principals to just say, be on the lookout for this email. So that'll go in all of the principal emails, so I'll probably shoot it out on Monday morning, hit the button, and then it'll go out, and then I'll send some reminders to do that. You should have all received an email from Mary regarding the Fales Leach Rogers Kunde Scholarship application. We have a meeting scheduled for 12/16 at 6. However, we also have a school building committee meeting at 6:30, right, Mary, at that time? So we may want to look at our schedules to see what we want to do about that, because I know I'm on school building committee, Nancy's on school building committee, you're on school building committee, and Mark.
Right.
So you can check. One option is we could change it to 12/17, which is really the only other time available that week. If not, we could move it to the week prior, which would be 12/6. I don't know if that's too early. Just note that there are 45 applications, which is much less than the previous year, so it might not take you as much time to go through those applications. So I'm looking, if you would be willing to look at those two options, 12/17 or 12/6, maybe Mary, you can, 12/14, 12/14. Yeah, what date do we have on the 16th? What date's the 16th?
16th is a Friday.
It's a Friday.
Okay, so what's the date?
13 doesn't work for me either, so
13,
I'd love
okay.
to move it.
All right, so we'll look at that, see if we can move it.
Yeah.
From Tuesday to that Wednesday. See?
I'm okay.
I'll have Mary, we'll send out the poll on Monday, and we'll see what we can do with a couple of options. But, do we all agree with the school building committee that we want to change it?
Makes sense.
The only thing I would do is maybe check with them, because every once in a while they cancel building meetings.
okay.
Like, see if it's gonna happen.
Okay.
But if it's gonna happen,
So we'll
Yeah.
check. We'll check.
then, yeah.
I have
Um,
one, too.
Couple of other things, just reminder that we're always looking for substitutes, and with the college crew coming back home, we can take Walpole graduates may be eligible to sub, so especially during the semesters. So we'll get that out. I can't believe I'm saying this, but snow days, I'll read it again. The superintendent of schools is ultimately responsible for the final decision to cancel school based on various weather-related factors and information received from the Department of Public Works. In the event of school cancellation or delayed opening, a recorded phone message will be sent to each family's primary phone contact. It's broadcasted through channels 4, 5, and 7 in Fox. We broadcast it on social media, and it's posted on the Walpole Public Schools website. And we send an email to all families. I think once you get one, it goes through like wildfire. Please note that DESE, the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education, will not allow any district-wide remote learning days to replace a snow day. So therefore, any snow days
It's a snow day.
is a snow day, and it's made up in June. And finally, I'm going to move from snow days so we can think about Thanksgiving break is coming up next week. Remember, we have early release next Wednesday and no school on Thursday and Friday, and I hope everyone will have a well-deserved break to relax and spend time with family. So, thank you.
Thank you. Any questions? Sean?
Just a quick question on the snow day alert. Is there any reason why it's only primary contacts that get a call?
I can check with Tom to see if I think it'll go through primary, it'll continue to call. But it's whatever they have in X2 that's set up, and that's where the snow, how the snow chain works. But I can check to see if in that system that they use, but I believe it's going to be only primary. But I'll check with Tom. It's a good question.
Other questions? Thank you, Dr. Roth. We will move right into superintendent goals.
Yes. Last meeting, you were provided with information regarding the goals, which included student learning, district, and professional practice that were aligned with the strategic plan. I think we waited to see if there were any questions. I didn't receive any. So I'll kick it over to you.
Okay. Any other questions or comments before I ask for a motion?
I'd make a motion to approve the superintendent goals.
Second.
We have a motion by Mrs. Galvin, second by Mr. Buckley. All those in favor? Those abstained, 600. And then we have the school improvement plans, which we decided we're reviewing but not voting on.
We
what we
can,
decided?
I don't know, we can recommend an approval. If you want. It's up
There was
to
a debate on whether or not we've voted to approve them in the past.
Well, I believe we will defer
I
to the
think it's
dean.
gone,
Do you
I think it's
remember?
gone
It's gone
back and
both ways.
forth. And but I think the recommended is to review them.
Review
And-
them.
And, because in some ways, this work has been done by a group of people months ago now. And for us just to sort of nitpick isn't right, but if there are things that are here, like, these improvement plans have a significant change based on
Yeah.
the feedback that we gave at this point last year. So I think that is what MASC is recommending, is give your overall feedback if there are concerns, but don't undo the work that these other groups of people have done.
Right, and I think we also talked about that it's not just the principals
Right.
that are coming up with these plans, that they're based on parent organizations as well.
Well, it's the school council.
School council, yeah.
So it's the combination of parents and teachers and administrators, yeah.
So with that, any comments or questions now that you've had time to review them? Carrie?
Just one, and I wasn't able to be here for the first meeting when these were presented, so I apologize for the lateness of this feedback. But one thing stuck out to me in the high school's portion of the plan. I noticed that in every and at every level, the school improvement plans are tied directly to the goals in the strategic plan. But the high school does not have any mention of goal 3 at all, which is the cultural proficiency goal. Now, I know that that is not because they're not doing work in that area, and I'm certain that there's probably things beneath other goals that would dovetail with also meeting goal 3. It just, for consistency's sake, it would be nice to see that explicitly stated, the same way it is in the middle schools and elementary schools in Daniel Community's plan.
Duly noted. I will give them the message. And Carrie, just on that, just that with the feedback from last year, we decided to put everything in one document, and thanks to Dr. Amber Cruz to help us with that and developing that, and then being able to have, those indicators.
And it's nice to see.
Outcomes and outputs.
The outcomes and outputs is a great addition. I think it's also just nice to have the ease of seeing how things are being addressed at each level too, and being able to flip back and forth and seeing how things connect. So, yeah, overall, I think they look really good. Yeah. Thank you.
Thanks.
Excellent. So moving on, the next order of business is the wellness policy.
Yes. So that was, we had the second reading, but there was a good comment made about waiting until the wellness committee met to make sure that the reviews of the wellness committee was held on November 10th. And that was attended by Dr. Hahn, myself, Kristen was there. It was led by our district nurse, Linda Anderson, Maria Hall, food service director was also there. So the committee reviewed the plan, discussed the changes, and accepted the changes of the wellness policy.
Yes. And Sean and Carrie were there as well.
Oh, that's right.
Yep, that's right. We had a whole
We
contingent.
had everybody was there, right?
We're committed to wellness.
All right. I skipped my workout so I could go to the wellness meeting.
Any comments or questions on the policy? Excellent. Can I get a motion to approve the policy?
So moved.
Second?
All right, motion by Jen, second by Bill. All those in favor? Those abstained, 600.
And thanks again, Sean, for painstakingly helping me to go through this and
Yeah.
get it down to bare bones.
All right, next order of old business, the middle school building project. So we had a little exciting week. Great groundbreaking. It was a nice next step in the project, a little more publicly than some of the other steps. And I know Mark isn't here, but anybody else have any other updates on the middle school?
Yeah, I just think we should say the building committee met that same night, and we're at the 90% mark, which we all have been holding our breath for in terms of the design is 90% complete at this point. And the financial news is good news. I mean, we are still on budget. There was a little bit of tweaking around the edges that had to happen at this most recent meeting, but I think all of us feel very okay about that. And it doesn't mean that we're in the clear, but it's one less time that we have to hold our breath. So what we also did on Tuesday night was we approved the next early release package, which means that the hole for the foundation should start to be dug in December. So, it's moving along. It's really moving along. And I know that all of you guys were concerned about where we were financially. They're hoping to get other bids in mid-January, and that's like the absolute, we'll know where we are until something else happens, but it's the main date that we're waiting for at this point. And, knock on wood, so far so good financially, so that's a big deal.
Great, good news.
Much better than the last round.
Right?
Much better.
Yep.
Excellent. High school renovation project. Mr. Ahern, any updates for us?
Yeah, nothing explicitly new. I think the Tepe and Compass are going to want to hear from us that some of the things that we discussed in the workshop are the final items that we would like to pursue for the design and have a sign-off on that at an upcoming meeting through a vote. But, you know, we'll look forward to the meeting that Bill mentioned in the coming week or so with the joint meeting to just share our view of the funding. So, you know, slow but sure.
Excellent. And subcommittee activity.
Through you, Madam Chair, just as a point of information.
Yeah.
Did we talk about a second high school workshop, or was that just in my head? So we're
We
not,
did discuss it. We
Yeah.
definitely discussed it.
so we're not gonna make any sort of recommendations? Are we gonna
No,
have
they're
at a
look-
meeting or at a workshop, I mean?
Yeah, they're looking in talking with Chris, that at our meeting today, about looking at those, I think we had a list of 6 that were above the line, that
Right.
were our priorities. So he can start that, his process, wants to just make sure that those 6 that are above the line are still those 6 that are above the line, that we didn't drop any or we didn't add any in. So we do need to discuss that. My thought is, is that something that we can talk about at our workshop on the 1st, to make sure that we would let Tape know, to say, okay, we're good with this, or no, we made some changes, so that they can go ahead and they can do what they need to do in terms of starting the process.
I think that makes sense, because we have the meeting on the 28th, where we
Yeah,
may
that's
get
gonna
some more
inform.
insight
Correct.
before
Yeah.
making
That makes
decisions.
sense then. Okay.
Right, because we need to understand how much of it is our say, which a big portion of it is, but the select board has a say also. I mean, we're tenants in their buildings, so, we have to move forward with something consistent. So I'm looking at it as November 28th is an important next step, but not necessarily the end of it. So, I think that's the way we have to go into the meeting on the 28th.
Excellent. Subcommittee activity. Going once. Okay. Citizens' comments. All right. No citizens. All right, let's move on to warrants.
I'd like to make a motion to approve the following expense warrants for the amounts listed in your packet. And those are warrants 223017 and 223018.
Second.
A motion by Sean, second by Carrie. All those in favor? Opposed, abstained?
That was slow, sorry.
This is 600, okay. All right, Sean.
And I'd also like to make a motion to approve the following payroll warrant for the amount listed in your packet. That is 2317PA.
Second.
Motion by Sean, second by Carrie. All those in favor? Opposed, abstained? 600. Would somebody like to take the gifts and donations?
Sure. I'll make a motion to approve the following gifts and donations: to Elm Street School, Fisher School, and Old Post Road School from Bay State Textiles Recycling in the amount of $194. To Johnson Middle School from the Joseph Mulligan Nominee Trust Athletic Equipment in the amount of $150. To Old Post Road School from the OPR PAC Junior Great Books in the amount of $487. And to Bird Middle School, Boyden School, Elm Street School, Fisher School, Johnson Middle School, Old Post Road School, and Walpole High School. From the Junior Women's Club of Walpole, School Health Office donation in the amount of $700.
A motion by Carrie, second by Sean. All those in favor? Any opposed? 600. Somebody like to take the minutes?
Through you, Madam Chair, I make a motion to approve the October 27th, 2022 regular school committee meeting minutes as presented.
Second.
Could I have a motion by Bill, second by Sean. All those in favor? Opposed? 600.
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
A motion by Carrie, second by Nancy. All those, all right, approved, 600. Excellent. Thank you, everybody.